What's up, ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? It's Dan here from Cryonoir. It's time for another one of my game making journey episodes. If this is the first one you've come to, well, where have you been, quite frankly? There's quite a few previous to this one, so if you want to get a general idea of sort of where I'm going, check back on those and see exactly how I've got to the point I am in this one. Not now, but in this one. This is like a historic thing. You'll get the idea when you see when you've watched them all. But anyway, on with the episode, I guess. Now that I had an informal business partner, it was time for us to decide where we were going to go from here. I'd been working on the idea of a top-down space shooter, kind of like Asteroid, but rather than being confined to a single screen, the player could fly around in multiple different areas. Josh had worked on multiple concepts over the years, and after playing through them all, we had to come to a decision as to which one we would like to flesh out into a larger project. The one that really stood out to me was the guy in the duck suit. I thought he was a really cool looking character, and the idea of having a protagonist that was just a guy in a duck suit really got me thinking. Almost like you could have a bunch of different superheroes, but rather than having them in all like sleek outfits, they'd just be a bunch of guys and gals in those ridiculous suits that companies make people wear for marketing. With that, we set off working, doing 1 week at a time on each game. After just a week of working on a space shooter, between us we'd got the ship flying around the basic level, with both the shield that would appear when the player collided with the walls, and a bounce mechanic so that the player would bounce off the wall and maintain momentum. We also had a firing solution set up that would increase the amount of lasers being fired as the firepower variable was increased. This meant that all we had to do was add a collision object that increased the ship's firepower by 1 each time one was collected, and we had the staple of all good shmups already in place. This was obviously the next step, but we also decided to change the laser's sprite depending on the amount of firepower the player had. I also had the idea that the player would have an energy meter that would power the shield. This would regenerate over time and would be depleted if ever the player was hit. The player could also use a kind of dash function that would both deplete the ship's energy level but would make the player temporarily invulnerable to damage. When in the dash state, the player could also deal damage to any ship that it collided with. This would produce a risk over reward situation with players. Do they use the dash to blast through some enemies but then leave themselves vulnerable to damage from any remaining enemies that they missed? Or do they use the dash sparingly and just to get themselves out of harm's way? We then also added an additional variable to the ship's fire rate. This meant that the ship could now be modified in both the speed of fire and the amount of lasers per fire. With the addition of some impact effects on the walls when the lasers hit them, this game was really starting to take shape. Not only were we making good progress with the space shooter, Taco Duck, as it was later to be named, was also coming along quite well too. Josh imported the sprites from the original game and set up a test level. He then added a taco cannon, whilst I got to work on setting up some basic enemy AI. First I set up a wandering blue thing that would patrol back and forth along the ground, followed by a dive-bombing effigy of Nicolas Cage's face. Josh then replaced the wandering blue thing with an actual enemy design, and then I added a music track that I'd written for the game. Even though we'd only put a couple of weeks into each of these projects, they were both beginning to take shape, and both of us were feeling pretty damn positive regarding the future of both titles. Then, a rather sizable bombshell dropped. Josh had initially made Taco Duck with a friend of his in a game jam, and his friend was none too happy about us using him in a full project. Tacos, it seems, were no longer on the menu. After some further talks and deliberations, Josh floated the idea of a procedurally generated platformer, much in the same vein as Spelunky, only rather than producing levels that were in a large square, they would produce levels that went from left to right, that had branching paths and huge variety in world design. Initially, I was not really on board. I'm not a huge fan of procedurally generated games in general. The only game that relies heavily on it as a core system that I'm a big fan of is FTL, and the main dislike I have with that game is the procedural generation. However, after talking more and more with Josh about it, I came around to the idea. The idea that the game would produce a seed at the start of each run, that could then be saved and then replayed by players, and even shared between players, really piqued my interest. As we'd only put a couple of weeks into the other projects, and had to abandon one of them anyway, starting on a new idea didn't seem like such a big deal. So away we went. I began by setting up some basic movement and animation, just to give us a base to work off, and Josh worked on a tile set and the procedural generation. Once they were in place, the game suddenly looked a whole lot better and began to look a lot more like an actual game. Next up, I began fine-tuning the controls for the players and added a double jump, whilst Josh designed a new character for the game. After chatting, we decided the character should be cute, but not too cute that it would look odd running around with a gun. I think the final brief that we came up with was kind of like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. And oh boy, did Josh deliver. Then it was just a matter of resizing the tile set to match the characters, making it further adjustments to the movement, and then more optimization and level generation scripts, and we were making some serious headway. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. As I said at the beginning, there's quite a few prior to this, and these last couple are just covering over what's been going on over the past year or so while I was working with Josh. If you want further details on any of these, you can actually just watch the devlogs from that time. And that'll go over everything in much greater detail. I've also done some more in-depth videos, such as my love letters to various different consoles, and also sort of a couple of little reviews and teardowns of games. And there's a huge amount of content on here regarding sort of retro collecting and retro collecting vlogs and that kind of stuff. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it all. Take it easy. Don't forget to hit that like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much, and I will see you all very soon. Take it easy. Bye bye.